Anglo-American University. So we will have an open discussion that we organize in cooperation with IREF, l'Institut de Recherche Économique et Fiscale, with a seat in France, Paris. And discussion will be on a really topical issue, will be on energy prices. So whether this energy shock in the market is the result of the government failure or market failure. So I expect very interesting discussion and of course excellent presentation by our colleagues and presenters. And let me introduce at the beginning Professor Enrico Combato, who is chairman of the scientific board of IREF, this institute located in France. Our partner, Enrico, the floor is yours.
Yeah, just a couple of words. Welcome to begin with, and IREF has been co-organizing this meeting with AAU, and we've been operating, well, a bit around Europe, but our main seat is in Paris since 2002. Dr. Schwartz is serving on the scientific committee of IREF. And well, at the very beginning we were working on fiscal issues, which means public debt, public expenditure, taxation. We are strongly free market oriented, and now we have moved on to retirement, well, other people's retirement, pension schemes, and monetary policy. And we have an English website, a French website, and contributions we do are welcome, and we carry out a research program which you find on our website, and all kind of interactions with the outside world is welcome. This very meeting is part of this communication with the outside world, and as you see, not only fiscal policy and monetary policy, but we also dive into energy issues, and Professor Coman is a professor at the University of Prague, which is about 40 kilometers outside of Paris, so safe, no strikes, no rubbish, and no violence on the road. And she was born as a specialist in German Franco relation and order liberalism, and has gradually moved into energy issues, and she is serving on a cooperation joint work committee between French and German government on policy making and energy issues in particular. She will be speaking for about half an hour, and if you have specific questions because she's not being clear enough on specific issues, you're welcome to raise your hand. I'll be moderating. I'll pick your question and you can address the speaker. If you have general questions and questions for debate, I would ask you to wait until the end of her intervention and of the comments put forward by the commentators. The commentators will be Mr. Barton and Mr. Page. Mr. Barton is local, and he is the chief economist at Natland, which is a consultancy company operating here in Prague, but with worldwide interests, and including, well, geographically and subject-wise. Whereas Mr. Page is working with General Electric, so very much in the energy story and more so, and he is working all over the world because he's traveling a lot and trying to understand and actually to affect future outcomes. So she will speak for about half an hour. They will speak for about 15 minutes each, and then the floor is open. And when the floor is open, that means that you can also pick some refreshments and bring them back to the main room so that you're not going to be exhausted too soon. Well, thank you very much for your attention, and Patricia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So, I feel very grateful to have been invited here in this very nice place by Professor Jerry Schwartz and to speak about a very rather complicated issue. And my title, or the title of my slides, looks provocative. It's about European gas prices do not need to be capped, they need to become less volatile. As you might know, in August 2022, we had an unprecedented peak in EU gas prices, up to by 1,000% compared to prices in previous decades. Over the last 10 years, the average price of gas was between more 5 euros, the megawatt per hour, dream price, and 35 euros a megawatt hour. And in August 2022, month ahead and day ahead prices on the so-called TTF, which is the main reference virtual market for gas trading in Europe, based in Amsterdam, hit an all-time high of over 300 megawatt the hour. Can imagine the shock. The highest price levels were reached over 5 consecutive trading days from 22 to 26 August 2022, when they were above 265 euros a megawatt an hour. And it seemed that apparently the price peak was triggered by the partial interruption of imports from Russia. And the EU decided to use a market correction mechanism, considering there is a market failure, in order to, quote, limit excessive spikes and stabilize an unstable and unpredictable market due to the staggering war in Ukraine. Well, as we might see, if we go further down, okay, no. Okay, here, you had the peak, and then it brutally went down, seemingly coming back to a normal situation. So what happened? The fact that the prices came back so easily down has to do with the fact that the inventories were full. They had filled, and there were no more suspicion about how are we going to go through the winter? Are we going to have enough gas? And so, okay, the market seemed to be coming back to a quiet movement. But then the Europeans considered that it could maybe, the devil is in the box, it could surge again, you know? And then politicians and all like that, if they see a danger, they want to control it and cap the price. So they decided, you know, I know maybe some people here were not or disagreed with that, but then you had to accept it anyway. But you had the member states, anyway, have agreed that the market correction will apply to the following derivative contracts on virtual gas trading platforms, month ahead, 3 months ahead, a year ahead, and it is automatically triggered when a specific market event occurs, like the month ahead price on the TTF exceeding 180 euro a megawatt for 3 working days, plus being 35 euros higher than a reference price on LNG global markets. It seems very technical. All in all, it is a very cautious capping. And a couple of days after the capping occurred, we heard that a sort of another market opened in London. So they are going, you know, if the prices happen to surge again, the capping won't be from no use because they will be in London. I mean, the prices will be in London on that new London market anyway. So it's sort of useless. Okay, my point is, what I'm going to try to explain to you is that, okay, the Ukraine and the Russian invasion are one aspect of the problem. But fundamentally, there are other reasons for the price surge. My thesis, my hypothesis, or I assume that, in fact, Europe is gradually entering the LNG market since about 2018. And this LNG market is a world market. And it has then to be in competition with the Chinese on that market. And it has to, I mean, the gas we got on such a high price was coming from, or had been rerouted and has been brought to Europe by American gas tankers who were considering selling it in Asia. But Asia, particularly China, was in lockdown, remember, last year still. And they didn't use it properly, so they went back and said, okay. And we were so anxious about not filling our inventory that we paid the price for that. But this market, this LNG market, is a spot market. It means this is a market where you buy very, very, it can be intraday, a day ahead, or a month ahead. It goes very fast. And at the same time, we had a conjunction of problems. There was the Russian problems, but there also was the fact that France had half of its nuclear industry down in maintenance. Nothing was working anymore, hardly anymore. We're supposed, you're laughing, I see you're laughing. Okay, the French, who are supposed to export their electricity, are very proud of their nuclear energy, where they had to import electricity even from the Germans. Can you imagine that? We were so offended. And this electricity that we imported, 15% of our electricity has been imported this winter from Germany, was on a very high price because it was made with this bloody gas, which had reached such peaks, So in France, there was a big theater, I would say. Everybody was very upset about the link between gas and electricity. So how comes that we have to pay for this, for such high prices? And there was all the good times where we have had our electricity from nuclear industry, everything. So, a good manageable electricity system and national and this all come from Europe and the bad Germans. And so there was a huge, German still is, a huge Franco-German battle. And because of this battle, I mean, the idea came up that, well, okay, the gas is responsible for everything, because it had raised a part of the electricity prices. I mean, this was sort of only a part of the truth. And if we come now, I come back to another explanation. I was a basic explanation coming back now. This doesn't look, I mean, this is, I need to bring a bit of explanations, because once you try to follow the public discussion, you're just completely confused. You hear about, okay, primary energy consumption. Then you have final energy consumption. energy mix, electricity mix. Okay. And each time the numbers are different. So if you want to, I mean, and it can be very different. If you look, here you have a primary or a graph about primary energy consumption 2021. And on this energy, in this respect, natural gas still represents more than 21% of our primary energy consumption in Europe. Of course, if you speak about electricity mix, you can say, okay, wind and solar generated a record 22.3% of EU electricity in 2022, for the first time overtaking nuclear, 21.9%. But in fact, electricity mix is only, or represents only 22% from our final energy consumption, and even less if you consider the primary energy consumption. The primary energy consumption, this is the whole energy you need. And it represents the production, domestic production in Europe, and the imports. If you speak of energy mix, you speak of the mix of the different components of energy produced in a country. This is completely different. If you speak about an electricity mix and say, okay, renewables represent a big part, half of it, sort of, or 45%, you might have better numbers, I don't know. It's a sort of provocation, I know, but you have to consider that as electricity mix is only 22% of the whole of the final energy consumption, then when you speak from renewable being, 45% of 22%, it's a bit more than 10%. That's it. It means renewables are just, again, not a small part of the primary energy consumption. We are not so far as we think we are. Just at, in the starting blocks. And if you have, you hear, at least in France, in Germany, okay, you get the impression half of our energy is renewables. This is not true. This is only half of electricity, electricity mix, and electricity is just 22% of our whole energy needs. Because with energy, you make electricity, or you heat, and so on and so forth. Half of the residents in Italy are on gas. And I don't know how much here. I don't know the numbers. But it might be very high as well. In Germany, half of the people are on gas, and they have, and I get alerts from the site Natural Gas World Project. EU extends emergency measure to curb gas demand. So I know some people are going to freeze next winter, and I mean in Germany, but Germans are tough people, we get it, and okay. So, okay. But this brings me to my question. It's a very, very serious question. If you have too high prices, I mean, either you have two solutions. Either you try to progress in supply, you have better supply, or you have to curb demand. And the point is, Europe is definitely on the way to curb demand and then you need autocratic positions, and you need authoritative measures, and this is a problem. The point is that with energy and with that situation of energy transition, we have constraints indeed. I'm not saying that there is no CO2 problem, emissions problem. This is not what I'm saying. I just say we just exaggerate a bit, and we should be very careful about not destroying the whole industry in Europe. And so what should we do with prices? And what we should, with that prices, we should first understand what the problem is. It's not only Russia. It's not only, okay, it's us entering a new market. And if I go, okay, down, yeah. LNG, you see the value of global trade hit an all-time high, doubling to $450 billion in 2022. And Europe was the primary driver behind the increase in LNG demand. So our very fast demand, urgent demand, provoked a surge in the whole world. This might be a problem as well. And okay, let's go. And then I'm going a bit faster because I don't want to be too long. This is an interesting graph. And I have to thank Enrico because he wanted me to explain that. And then, do you have a graph about this? You know, the fact, can you prove that the TTF market month ahead followed the Asian spot LNG? And so I found that, and I have to explain that. You have, in the world, you have three big gas markets, LNG market, LNG, you know, the liquefied gas. You have the Henry Hub, which is the American market, it's like here. And then you have the Asian spot LNG and the TTF. And if you have a look, what happened? Of course, we got a peak, but we followed this Asian spot market. And how comes? How comes? Because most of our deliveries, 44% of our urgent deliveries came from America, from gas tankers coming from America. And the Henry Hub is very low. So, okay, the guys really, they are happy. They have a good market. Why that? It's because this is not an import market. It's just an export market. They are exporters. This is why the prices are still very low. And we don't benefit from that because we are in competition with the Asian market. And we have to offer better prices if the Chinese or if Asia have to, need more gas. So this is, if you look at that, you see there is definitely we depend not only on the US gas tankers, but we depend on the Asian demand and on the Chinese demand, particularly. I'm going to go. Okay, still have 15 minutes. Another problem we have, and Gordon is going to speak more about that. LNG market is a rather illiquid market. You speak about illiquid market where the market is too small. And it means we have hardly any substitution possibilities. You know, it is a small market. And the dream of the Europeans was, okay, we're going to make a bigger market of it. The reality is that it didn't become a bigger market. Why? Because last year and this coming year, Asia, and particularly China, came back to these long-term contracts they had before. They And when we had that long time ago, a couple of years ago, I spoke with traders and they said, we worked like that. We were fixed, our prices were following the oil prices, you know, and we had long-term contracts, like 20 years at least. And the Chinese are still there. And the Chinese people didn't have any problems with electricity bill or gas bills because they still are on these long-term contracts. And China went to Qatar a couple of months ago and concluded long-term contracts again. And why don't we have that? Why are we leaving that? I mean, this has, of course, something to do with energy transition, because when Mr. Habeck, the German economy minister, wants to conclude a long-term contract, again with Qatar, he has the Greens over that. No, we want to get out of gas. You can't conclude a contract for 20 years because in 20 years there is no more gas. Fertig. Aus. I'm not so sure. Okay, so he tries now to conclude contracts which for 10 years, you know, a bit careful. Anyway, there is a new situation where companies try to conclude long-term contracts again, but not saying it too clearly, and the Greens are very upset. Oh no, we don't want nuclear, we don't want coal, we don't want gas, nothing, only renewables. But this is a bit the discourse of the Greens in Germany. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but hardly. The problem is we can't do it without gas. Why? Because it's not only used for heating, because it's used as a complement to renewables. Natural gas and renewables energy work together throughout the day, with natural gas seamlessly stepping in when the wind dies down. It's very, very poetic. When the wind dies down or it's cloudy, natural gas-fired power plants have the ability to ramp up rapidly when needed and deliver the complement we need to let the system work. So this is a very complicated situation because we are supposed to leave the gas, get out, but we need it at the same time, as long as renewables cannot be stored, as long as wind cannot be decided. Maybe one day we decided we will have wind or whatever, but it's natural, you know. In 2021, the Germans had a terrible fall down in wind because they had hardly any wind. So the wind farms were a disaster, and they were happy to buy our electricity. French were very proud. Okay, next year was just the opposite. The French had to, we need your electricity. But okay, so this is the problem. It is a very, very tricky situation where we need to get out of it, supposedly, but we still need it to go further with renewable as long as we're not able to store and to transport properly. I mean, this energy produced by renewables. So one day, I'm pretty sure we'll get it sorted, but now we need a sort of transition time in order to make things happen. I mean, because if we would say tomorrow, okay, we have to leave the gas, as the Greens wanted in Germany, and leave nuclear industry, everything is just crashing down. It doesn't work, you know. And so this is, of course, so the amount of gas we need can be reduced. We can say, okay, we're going to heat less, 15 degrees, the Germans, and yeah, whatever. In residential, they want to change, and they want heat pumps and whatever, and other systems, or they want to get to hydrogen, whatever. The problem is we still need that gas. And we need it to produce here hydrogen as well. We're so keen on hydrogen, But almost whole hydrogen, which is produced now, is produced from gas. So, okay, until we will be able to produce it from, the blue hydrogen from the sea or from renewables, we need time. We need time. So, how it's going to work? I'm going to 5 minutes. Yeah, I say. Okay, so just here, LNG demand remains high worldwide. The renewables are just the little orange part up there worldwide. So this is where we are. I'm sorry, guys. This is where we are. We really have a very long way to go before being clean. Not 2050, we won't be there. I don't think so. So, okay. The point is, I'm going to my conclusion. European gas demand remains unpredictable because this is why prices will remain volatile. The REPower EU's objectives imply that European gas demand would be more than halved by 2030. But the targets which have been put by the youth are just wishful thinking. I'm sorry. Targets for wind and hydrogen are likely to be missed. For example, the EU targets to have 510 gigawatt of installed wind capacity by 2030. That would require 36 gigawatt to be added annually, but only 15 gigawatt were added in 2022. And the International Energy Agency expects only 17 gigawatt to be added over the period. So we're not there. We're not on the halfway. It's just lie. As gas centrals remain an indispensable complement to renewables, and shifting to alternative heating methods has a high cost for all European countries. Just see the mess in France, actually. I mean, the people are just if you say, okay, we're going to bring, again, billions to develop the infrastructures and renewables, they will crush everything. I mean, it's no more sustainable to go that way. And we should go, we should go on. Yeah, so my very conclusion, 2 minutes. Thank you, Professor. We have, again, to secure long-term LNG contracts in the wake of the consequent offshore exploration projects of the oil and gas sector in the next 2 years. It's not nice to hear, but it's part of the reality. We might have to develop domestic gas exploration in Europe, but by using CO2 capture technologies, as the demand for gas still will remain high. Even by 2050, I won't be around anymore. I suppose by 2050, maybe the youngest one will remember my discourse. And consider nuclear energy as a low-carbon source of energy, this is French-speaking, in order to have a reliable substitute, maybe to gas, on the European electrical grid. And of course, developing renewable energies, efficient storage and transport capacities for electricity produced by renewables. But we have somebody here who is going to speak more about that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Martin.
Okay.
We go for questions after.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's any direct questions to
Ah, okay.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Patricia, for your wonderful presentation. As you may have noticed, we've turned down the temperature outside, especially for this event, so that you appreciate that much more, talking about energy. I know you've all been looking forward to spring, but just not there yet. We will get there eventually, and I hope to bring some shift of focus and maybe some positive news, in that the good news that it seems that we won't have to worry that much about gas in the longer term, in the 5-10 year window. The bad news is that a lot of the energy is going to be shifted into worrying about electricity, and this is roughly what I'm going to try to show you. But since a picture is worth roughly 1,000 words, let me show you one picture that I very much like, and if there's one thing that you'll bring, or that you'll take home from my bit, let it be this picture. Just to show you why we have picked the Czech Republic to be the place to discuss energy. Appropriately enough, the Czech Republic is the third largest depender on energy, the third largest energy intensive economy, meaning we need the most energy to produce one given unit of GDP in terms of energy expense. Everything is energy. You may recall your physics lessons at your secondary school. We economists have long neglected energy. We said everything can be transferred to some monetary value, or later, when we abandoned money as a guiding principle, everything is some sort of exchange in principle, or everything is utilities. And at least for the last 2 years, we've come to realize that behind everything is the energy bit, on whose smooth functioning we, as economies, not necessarily just economists, have been relying too much. Now, Bulgaria is the country which is even more dependent on energy, or needs even more energy to produce a given unit of GDP. That is partly the heritage of relatively cheap energy of communist times, but also the unfortunate effect of relative poverty in Bulgaria, because if your GDP is relatively small, then the denominator in that thing, energy over GDP, of course, if you're dividing by a relatively small number, you're going to get a high number. So maybe we should have had this conversation in Bulgaria, but I just checked the current temperature in Sofia. Right now, it's 6 degrees in Prague, it's 3 degrees in Bulgaria. So thank us that we don't have to be in Bulgaria. And Malta is also a special case, of course. Most of the energy is going on air conditioning for tourists. It's hardly a model to be followed by energy policy for a country. Now, the Czech Republic's energy dependence, that's not to say that we have old machines that are heavy in production. We're the most industrialized country in Europe. 70% of our GDP is, 70% of GDP in normal countries to the west of us is services. In the Czech Republic is only 60%. So we have, agriculture is roughly the same in all countries except Poland. And therefore we have basically 10 percentage points more of GDP in industry. Our machines are just as energy efficient as the German ones. The only problem is our machines, our robots, produce a Skoda. The German robots produce, with the same amount of energy, a BMW. BMW sells for more. That's why we need more energy, not overall necessarily, but we're just worse than the Germans in producing some real value added through GDP. These are the 4 challenges that I see are the most, the biggest challenges for the coming period. And I will just briefly outline with them within the limited time that I have available. And I promise towards the end I will come to the already foreshadowed German-French energy relationship. Of course, that is the central question that we all have to deal with somehow. Now, we've heard a lot about nuclear. France could have been our role model for nuclear. I wonder, do you know what country is the second most nuclear dependent in Europe? Any guesses? After France. France is by far, 70% of energy, well, somewhere between 2/3 and 70% in nuclear. So there's one more country which is more than 50% in nuclear. I wonder if you would know. Yes?
Slovakia.
Say it loud and proud. Yes, our brothers in Slovakia.
Okay.
So it is a crucial point, especially in Central Europe, where we don't have access to the sea. Right? We've heard so much about gas. Now, if you're a country like Romania, you have some little bit of your own gas, but otherwise you need the sea to give you gas, either by drilling in the sea, because it's easier, you don't have neighbors to worry about, drilling on soil. Of course, fracking is another question. I don't have the time to open up that question. Just let it be said, for the record, that will probably see a large move and change of the regulations which are now holding back the prospects of fracking for gas on land in Europe as opposed to the US. But it's too much of a topic, worth perhaps a separate symposium. So we don't have access to the Czech Republic or our Slovak brothers to the sea, and therefore we can't drill them, or the modern drilling, which is build a terminal and have other drills from around the world bring gas into those terminals for LNG. Now, the beautiful thing about markets is that you don't have to fight wars in order to get access to the sea. Wars is one way, hoping that we're going to be victorious. I just wonder where we should attack in order to get access to the sea, so that we can also hold it after some sort of victorious war. Or, of course, we can wait a couple of thousands of years and wait for the sea to come to the Czech Republic. Eventually, we will get sea, so our grandchildren will probably be able to bring some gas on ships if there is ever such a need by that time for gas. But the beautiful thing about exchanges and markets is that you can buy access to the sea. And that's exactly what the Czech Republic has done. The Czech Republic now owns, a part of, but we put the part of in brackets, an actual LNG terminal, because it's in paper. There are two bits of Czech Republic soil, if you will, in the Netherlands. One is reputedly the place where Comenius, the educator of nations and the founder of the modern educational system, is buried, and they say, that's a little bit of Czech Republic soil. And that used to be our only one in the Netherlands. Now we have a second one, because we have co-bought, together with the Dutch and others, a stake in the first post-energy crisis terminal for LNG shipments. So now that third of capacity is completely Czech Republic's. It is not owned by the state, but sort of is, because the state-owned company owns that contract or has that contract. And therefore, now even the Czech Republic has access to sea and has access to the gas terminals. But the problem, as we've heard, is not going to be gas solution. Problem of gas solution, even in what we've said as the compensator for the renewables when it doesn't shine and doesn't blow, the Western European countries compensate that by switching on and off the gas power plants. We don't have gas power plants. We have one, and we cannot possibly have enough capacity in that one gas power plant to be the act of switch on, switch off when it doesn't shine and when it doesn't blow. In Eastern Europe, we switch on and off, according to the weather, coal power plants. And they have been deemed illegal or bad for you even longer than the gas ones. So now that we are entering the region where they will be decommissioned, and because they are part of the Czech Republic's so-called baseload, i.e. the thing which is on more or less constantly, so that's like the lowest point at night, how much electricity you need, that you need to have as the baseload, and therefore we will need to replace that replace the coal that is currently producing part of our baseload with nuclear. What else to produce it with? Do we have, and that's the question maybe for us to discuss, do we have even the soft resources to build enough traditional nuclear power stations in Europe? We have enough cement, we have enough the hardware stuff, but there seems to be a lack of engineers, lack of people with the know-how to be able to actually manage these huge multi-year, often multi-decade problems to build up. Now, Poland is starting to build nuclear, they haven't had any. Everybody is now ramping up in the nuclear is now the new kid on the block. And the question is there going to be capacity in the world to build up enough nuclear? That's challenge number one. Challenge number two is the potential gas problem, is that going to be solvable, at least in part, by some sort of collective action on the part of the Union? We've heard a lot whether the European Union is going to somehow buy collectively. We've had examples of going to the Middle Eastern countries and buying in bulk. Is that going to help in Europe? And if that is the plan, are we going to overcome what economists call the collective action problem of individual countries? Will they be able to agree on the form in which Europe should buy in bulk? And, associated matter, if it's bought by the European Union, what happens in the case of zombie apocalypse? What happens if the markets break down so much that European Union has contracted enough of gas, but how does it get to countries like Czech Republic, like Slovakia, if there is no prior direct contract for a particular piece of gas to actually be shipped into those countries? I think that's a big challenge for the future if we go the route of regulating in effect and buying in bulk to get some sort of advantage. The third challenge is the difference between the economist's view of the future and an investor's point of view of the future. It's nice to say that we need to do the energy transition. In the short run, we need to secure more gas through LNG and other forms. The investor is looking at it and saying, can you assure me that the price of gas is not going to fall? Now, we all like prices of gas to be small, to be low, but an investor needs them to be high, and an assuredly high, in order to invest into the extra capacity, whether it's LNG terminals, whether it's fracking, whether it's other things. And I just wonder, part of the reason why it's so high, why there is this scramble for LNG in the world, is clearly because of the Russian boycott of gas. How sure are we that the governments in Europe will keep up the boycott in 1 year, 2 years? It's clear that the boycott is not going to be around in 100 years' time. Maybe we won't even need to have Russian energy in 100 years' time. Now, if we know that the boycott is here now, and it's not going to be here in 100 years' time, now we're just arguing about when it's going to end. And if it's going to end soon enough from the point of view of investors, i.e. less than the window that you need to recoup the investment you're going to need into alternative gas sources, then it's not a good investment effort. We would be able to secure more gas much more quickly if investors were assured that the politicians will uphold their boycott of Russian gas. Now, the thing which is threatening the politicians is the yellow vests. If what you see in France following the petrol crisis, which it was largely the cause of, I believe, the yellow vests, following now that it's not just petrol prices, it's all prices, and if it continues long enough, it's not going to be yellow vests, it's going to be yellow overalls, it's going to be yellow, I don't know, deep sea diving gear, whatever. And that pressure on politicians to remove that boycott is going to be even greater. Now, the last bit is the cross-border electricity flows. At the moment, we kind of solve them. Okay, the French nuclear power stations have been decommissioned temporarily, they're being repaired. Again, it's not necessarily, I have to stand up for the French, it's not necessarily their fault. Think you're, again, an investor, and you have a nuclear power station, and you keep hearing from the European Union, oh, I'm not so sure whether we can classify nuclear as really clean. Is it really clean? We're not sure. And you've been hearing that for decades. how much will you be willing to invest in keeping up your nuclear power stations if you're not sure whether they're going to be legit in a couple of years' time? It's the same thing with refineries. We hear that the end of combustible engines is nigh in 10, 12 years' time. Who is going to now, in the remaining 12 years, going to invest in keeping up refineries? Not many. High oil prices or gasoline prices and diesel prices are coming, not because of the oil prices overall, but because there's not going to be the same fate which now has befallen the French nuclear power stations is already befalling refineries. And therefore, what is the future for the cross-border transfers of energy? Because remember, we have gotten rid of coal, so to speak. It's decommissioned, it's being decommissioned, the sun sets on coal. Now, in addition to that, now we're setting the sun on gas. So the only allegedly clean energy is going to be electricity, depending on how you mix it. And therefore, whatever is being done now by gas and petrol and diesel, that's all shifting into electricity. We're going to, whatever we're talking about now, a separate market, it's gas, and there's a bit of gas, there's a bit of petrol and diesel. In 10 years' time, 15 years' time, it's going to be whatever, 80% electricity. And for that, these cross-border flows will be crucial. Now, very quickly, just three, and now I'm finished. This is just to show the Czech electricity exports, just to dispel the myth, which is often used in the Czech Republic. Oh, if only we got away from the European trading mechanism with electricity, we wouldn't need to export so much energy to Germany, and we would have more energy left for us, and therefore we would be able to sell it cheaply. That's complete misunderstanding, not only of economics. Now, you can be granted ignorance of economics because it's not really taught, unfortunately. But at least instead of what you should have at secondary schools, economics lessons, you had physics lessons. And saying that completely misunderstands the nature of electricity. Electricity, once it is produced, and if there's no domestic demand for it, you might as well sell it to Germany, even for free, because you have no other use for it, because you can't store it, unlike with gas. And therefore, whatever we're selling to Germany is not really usable at that time at home. And besides, look at the graph. This is showing how much, the pointer is working, yes. This is just showing the exports of the Czech Republic, how much it's selling where. And the line is just as thick going out from Czech Republic to Germany as it is thick from Germany to Czech Republic. Our trade, energy trade, electricity trade with Germany is roughly balanced. We sell to them roughly just as much as they sell to us. Most of the exit, we do sell overall more electricity than we import, but most of it goes to Slovakia and to Austria. They claim that they don't have any nuclear power, but they're happy to buy nuclear power from us, from a nuclear station just from the border. Interesting case, and I purely put it on for the sake of general interest. What is the hungriest electricity country that imports a lot? I'm not saying most, because it depends how you measure it, but relatively, absolutely, but imports a lot from other countries. It is Italy. If you look at Italy, it exports basically zero. It's just occasionally if the neighbor needs like a little thing has shut off, can you sell us a little bit? It's tiny amounts. But a lot of it comes from Switzerland, of course, from the Alps, from France, from Austria, basically from all the neighbors. And there's a lot of the other countries have a lot of bilateral trade. A little bit here, a little bit comes back. Italy just brings in. Therefore, we also have to talk about how is Europe going to supply the Italian needs? And this is the last picture, just to demonstrate whatever the French, what happened to the French-German energy relationship. This is 2021, the year before energy crisis. France exports just as much energy as Germany, right? The width of the circumference devoted to France and to Germany is roughly the same. Now, the specific relationship between France and Germany is this one, and you can see that France exports to Germany a lot more than Germany exports to France. That has been true, I don't know since when, but until 2021. That was one of the givens. French nuclear power stations are powering a lot of neighboring countries, including Germany. Now, in 2021, that reversed. And now Germany exports energy to France. So just to close, I think the German role in all of this has been somewhat overappreciated. It has left out one additional culprit of why there is this energy problem at the moment, especially on electricity and indirectly through gas. And just like there's a famous saying, the biggest historic success of Austria is to convince the world that Hitler was German. In modern terms, we can say the biggest success of France is to convince the world that the European energy problem is solely due to Germany. Thank you very much, and looking forward to your questions.
I agree with you. Very good.
Well, so much has been said here.
You have been under attack.
Important sales, cheap energy. I'll try and discuss a couple of points that you mentioned. I made a mental note for myself.
I want to speak up a bit.
Okay, fair play. First of all, you mentioned that, and I think that's a good point, you mentioned that one of the problems of the European LNG markets is the utter lack of liquidity. The same, even the thirst for the long-term contracts difference between how Asians are hungry for gas versus us. Because the market is illiquid and because of occasional caps and interventions, the market itself is not efficient, you are correct, and the market participants do not have the equal ability to seek best possible price at any possible time. So that is generally, I agree with that, and I can compare and contrast that with the wholesale electricity market in Europe, which is anything but illiquid, meaning it is extremely liquid. 15, 16 countries, emerging TSOs, and so institution and the ability to cross-border trade in Europe has effectively proven that if you do have a liquid market without unnecessary interventions that is equally or well enough connected amongst players, that market can absorb certain external distractions such as the current situation with the gas prices. You also mentioned something about price caps and how they don't work. I will tell you an example, again, comparing and contrasting to the electricity market, where it may or may not work. In Serbia, they finished first 500 megawatts of renewable energy capacity a couple of years ago, and the government was preparing for the next round of renewable energy to add more to the grid, given that the coal capacities are old, they're expiring, not efficient, they need to be replaced. So things were going well, they hired EBRD, everybody else, so they said, okay, we want to make sure these local investors, they don't rob us too much, we got to put a price cap, because we want to make sure it's competitive. Okay? At the same time, the market price went up 4 times what the market cap that was given and proposed by the Serbian energy regulator. So on a spot market, 220 euros megawatt hour, even the average was 210, and the government proposed we would give you 58 as the energy producer. So that system collapsed, the meaning did not come to fruition. So what happened with the market players, they weren't just sitting. They weren't just sitting and waiting, they were actually following where they could get a better price. So they would sign the corporate or virtual PPAs where a company in another country or in that country can guarantee we're going to buy this much power from you at this price. So the system did not work because of that intervention and also because the market was not liquid. So I do agree there with you on from that point of view and the market dynamic in electricity and gas. Now, you also mentioned something very dear to my heart, which is that the renewables are not as important as we make it to be. Yeah, that is true. The reason for that, because we are not making enough progress as the world in the renewables as much as we are promising and telling each other that we have to do this. In 1979, there was about 37% of coal was, coal was 37% net contributor of electricity. And then in 2019, it's almost 1% more. Last 3 years, the investments in renewable and in fossil fuels were almost identical. I'll just
Yeah.
double check my chart. Yeah, they're almost identical. And yes, we did have an amazing year as renewables last one, with the most investments and installations of record-breaking 300 gigawatts globally. That's great. Europe is only 10% of that. China, 114 gigawatts, almost 2/3, and the rest is Little America and Australia. So it's not that renewables are not good, but we're not doing enough. As simple as that. The amount of talking about renewables and amount of adding renewable capacity versus other capacities is simply not on the same page. I'm not going to go into the politics. Governments do have a job, which is to win elections. It's not really to make markets effective. And it's important for me to note that natural gas is, I would not agree that it's very complementary to renewables. Anything that can dispatch power is complementary to renewables. That can be pumped storage, or, you also asked me, or the future of battery storage, which the energy producers want to start with. And I will tell you one more interesting paradox of wind industry. Last year was the quote-unquote best wind industry, best year for the wind manufacturers for wind turbines. There's 5 of 6 of us. The most investments, the most projects, great. Still a dent in the global footprint, but nevertheless, we all lost money. More than $6-7 billion were in losses between major, this is public information, between the major Western Oriental wind energy producers, Siemens Gamesa, Nordex, Vestas, General Electric, etc. So we lost money. And now that we are contracting the industry, some factories for blades are being closed in Europe, shipping to India, except despite the shipping fees and everything else. So the industry, the renewable industry is in a bit of a paradox mode. So if somebody tells you there's this money flowing around and we're all having a lavish life, no, we're not. The industry is in deep trouble in the past couple of years because of Corona, because of the fact that globalization is over. I think that needs to be mentioned too. We all buy steel few months before we ship it because we sell the project a year and a half before delivery. So those kind of things have hurt the industry greatly, and that's why we, even though this is a great growth, it's not enough. According to IRENA, which is the International Energy Efficiency Agency, or sorry if I missed the acronym, they say that for us to decrease or to reach the energy, the temperature targets of 1.5 degrees by 230, we need to install 3 times more than what we installed last year, which was supposed to be a record. That's not happening, as simple as that. But there is a future in this world. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't have to be a train or something like that. I see projects with solar and wind in places where there's no government incentives. We used to dream in the renewable industry that we're going to have grid parity, meaning that our LCOE, levelized cost of energy, will be on the level as a 20-year-old coal farm that has repaid our tax money and a million other things that it needs to do. And we have reached that. But now the world is taking a different shape. We are exposed to the globalization. We, as the manufacturers, are paying a big price for that and eagerly awaiting what the politicians, just like all of us, will have to say, and if we can get out of the red and start making some money. So that is a quick summary in the connection to your points. Specifically, I want to thank you for talking about electricity trading. I think that is extremely forgotten and important topic. Your last question is, will the increased cross-border trading improve the energy market? 100%. That is the goal. I am firmly believing that if I can make a kilowatt hour in a sunny place, and I have so much sun that day, and in another place something else falls off, they need the kilowatt hours, the market is open, market is free, if it's well connected, it's well protected, it can work. Simple as that. So I'm going to sit down here and you can ask us questions.
Okay, now the floor is open, and if you have questions, raise your hand and I will make a notice and rank this contributors. Nobody wants to break the ice? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Martin Papaskan from the Czech TSO Chips. And I have a question about the overall, let's say, approach to what you just said, that the nations or countries are buying gas, and because we are here in Europe used to have a free market somehow, and it's on the state who is buying something. But in the crisis, we saw that states were interfering in this global trade and trying to somehow ensure the deliveries. But in the end, who was buying? Was it the state? In the Czech Republic, definitely not, because we have a quite free, let's say, market environment and legislation. But how in the West? Because I think that not all the states are really respecting this free trade. So how do you see this?
Not at all.
Let's say difference or clash between free market and free world markets, and the companies securing everything, and the state who intervenes and trying to secure this.
That was
Talk
addressed
about
to
electricity.
Whoever.
I can mention, as I said, I can mention.
Prime Minister says.
Yeah, I can mention my experience in electricity. Okay, just to give you an idea, how is the electricity price set for renewable energy resources? Because it's a new technology, when it started 15, 20 years ago, the government needed to give an incentive. That was the price of power for wind turbine guys and solar guys and everything else. So the government would give an incentive to bring the industry to a level where it can operate itself, right? So as the world progressed with Germany and France, they first had a feed-in tariff, then they entered into the auctions or contract for difference, which I don't really like, but that's a long discussion. So the government started, they were interfering in the prices for renewable energy sources from day one, because we wouldn't have them without the incentive. So we didn't enter as an organic baby growing. That doesn't work in the market. So the government had to interfere from day one. And then as the industry was growing, the feed-in tariff was decreasing. The feed-in tariff would be set by the regulator, usually in conjunction, how much do we pay for coal, how much does it cost for unit of electricity from hydro, from solar, and then they calculate that in, and then they control the price. And then they stop in theory, and then they stop. And in some markets, in Greece, in Spain, there's auctions which are more or less blind, you can participate, but the government puts a bit of either a ceiling or a floor, and then you can operate within this space. That's the first intervention. And it kind of worked, as long as the ceiling and floor are within the reality. You don't want your bidders to make too much money and bankrupt you. You don't want to press them too low that you get shitty bridges, bad turbines, bad bridges, bad infrastructure. So we are interfering again, but it kind of works. When you let go of everything and you just put a ceiling in a world which is in so much flux, where you as an investor, it costs you 40% more in capex to build that project, and I intervene with the price ceiling, you will, if you have an opportunity, you will not work within that system. You're going to seek the price somewhere else so it can match how much you are spending today, which is more. Cost per megawatt from technology of renewables is now again €1,000,000. Before the corona and everything, it was like 700 and something thousand. The industry was in deflation. Now it's in inflation. So you need to ask more money from whoever. And if I interfere you, in whatever reason, you will find another way. And that's why the government had a really bad, not that they care, but okay, it's not good marketing. They announced the auction, they were going, this is going to do, then the shitstorm happened, and they said, we're going to price cap it so below the reality where I can get something somewhere else, and the system never came to fruition. And through few projects went outside and found much better opportunity than within that system, which failed because the government interfered in a wrong way, simply, from the electricity point of view.
I can make 3 quick points, a minimalist, a maximalist, and an unhappy medium. The minimalist point, yes, of course. Who else knows more about how to set prices and how to secure markets, how to secure the supply of anything than the companies? That is a given. That is why I posted that problem as a challenge. What do companies, which are now currently securing the future energy, whether it's gas, whether it's electricity, what are they going to do in light of this solution in search of the problem? Let's coordinate everything just like we saw with under COVID, European countries trying to buy, to coordinate the buying of face masks. And let's buy it in bulk in China because China will not be able to say no to us because we're big. There is this almost Freudian envy of the European Union. Look how big the other big centers of economy are in the world economy, right? We've got the big United States. Look how much they can do because they've collected all the individual states and now acting as one economy. Look at China. And now we're just these allegedly splintered things. Of course, we need to boost up the, let's count the GDP not by country, but let's count the GDP by the European Union so that we can show how much of a negotiating power is going to be, right? That is what I fear of this coordinated effort, which is going to challenge the individual companies which are in charge. That's the minimalist kind of optimism. The maximalist unhappy point is if you believe that there is much future in the immediate aftermath of COVID, to which this energy thing is almost just a footnote associated with COVID, right? That was the first springboard for all of this. I envy your optimism because once again, COVID has shown us that whatever the question is, the answer seems to be more government or nationalized government. Now, I jested with the fact that 70% of the dominant Czech energy provider is owned by the state. That is almost not a good example because that company still has to compete for the market price with all the other private companies. So it might have some corporate governance issue because of the state involvement, but it is not so much actually dictated, or so far the prices haven't been dictated by the state. And for all intents and purposes, that company, 70% owned by the state, but 30% is so far traded freely on the stock market, and that is crucial because it is, although it is a state-dominated company, it is still subject to the normal reporting rules and to the normal legislature, which dictates is that it must maximize profit. In fact, if you follow the debate, that's actually the crux of the argument now. Is the state-owned company allowed to not maximize profits? And the minority owners are going through the stock market and say, look, you have to follow the legislation. This is a normal commercial company. Just happens to be owned by the state, but it has to follow the rules of maximizing the profit. So I'm not worried about that. Now, the unhappy medium. Maybe we already are there. What is a price ceiling other than a direct, almost state involvement? Because so far, we've managed to avoid the hard questions. What happens if the shadow price were to rise above the ceiling? Because the moment it was said, there's two caps that we're talking about. There's the European cap and then there's also the Czech cap. Both prices are below the cap. So the cap might as well not exist, right? We know from elementary economics, if the price ceiling is above the market price, who cares? Just some bureaucrats are kept happy, but in the larger scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Now, if the price were to rise, I don't think that we've been overemphasizing and over-worrying about the spike last year. One thing I wanted to say is that spike looks huge and hugely problematic. It's like, 80 times, not 80%, 80 times the previous normal pre-COVID prices. But what is often forgotten that so little was traded at those prices. It's purely an effect of a shallow market. Of course, if nobody is selling and nobody is buying, any price is possible, both infinity and zero. And we know that in electricity markets, we can actually have negative prices as well, right? With Scandinavia, when it blows, they're paying people to get rid of that. So that unhappy medium means that once you have that cap, and should the shadow price go above that cap, we would essentially have nationalized the thing, because then it would be up to the government to what happens about the difference if there is the shadow price and they're not allowed to trade above that. Well, somebody must be able to get that gas for normal prices into Europe, because if Europe not as a geographic entity, but not as a political entity, but as geographical location, cannot convince the ships to actually bring the Asian labeled gas from Asia to Europe, then who is going to make sure that there is enough gas in Europe, right? So that is a difficult question we'll have to solve once the shadow price were to go above the ceilings, but the fact that there are ceilings means that it's already there. The question is already there, and then once we have the shadow prices above the ceiling, then the actual distribution companies are just going to be distributors of whatever the state or some other cross-government partnership, contract, whatever, has provided for us, for them. They're just going to be distributors, no longer acting in it. So unfortunately, with the caps, we're almost already there. That's the unhappy medium.
Wow.
No
Okay.
answer to short questions. Who's next?
Wow.
I have a, oh, yes, go ahead. Sorry.
I'd like to, well, my name is Alumni. I'm from brother's country, Slovakia. I'd like to ask about the wind turbines industry. First, what share of the market is covered by non-EU or US suppliers, like from Asia, of wind turbines?
Okay.
And what's your guess? Are we going to have enough production capacity to satisfy the goals of increasing generation capacity of wind industry?
Okay, good. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. So, first of all, your first question was okay. The top producers, the top Western producers in the world, or the top producers in the world, are considered Western producers. You have Vestas. There's only 5 of them: Vestas, Nordex, Siemens Gamesa, Enercon, General Electric. Those are the main ones. I think there's 1 or 2 more small European ones that are not envisioned. These guys act globally except China. China installs half the world global almost half the world capacity just in China. Chinese manufacturers, there is 6 or 7 of them that make wind turbines. There's 1 or 2 that are kind of good and the rest are kind of weird. And they act in a very ununiform way. And they're all, of course, state companies. Goldwind, Shanghai Electric, Winday, etc., etc. None of those wind turbines, none of those manufacturers currently have a big footprint in Europe or anywhere else in the world except Asia. They just started to enter European markets. In Croatia, we have a 100-something megawatt wind project with a Chinese company now.
Yes.
If I may have 2 comments. The Berkeley mentioned the intensity of per capita consumption in several countries. Bulgaria is very specific. In Bulgaria, majority of heating systems is electricity. So this is the big influence on per capita consumption. Second comment is on the flows of energy export and import. When wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, so Czech Republic is a battery for Germany because they don't have enough baseload to have electricity there. So that's and you mentioned that Czech transmission operator wake up and said, we need much more baseload now. So instead of 1 nuke, we would probably need 3 nukes. Not only Dukovany, but probably also 2 nukes in Temelín, which is crazy because it's scattered like. So this is 2 comments only.
Mm-hmm.
Just very quick reaction in 1 sentence. With Bulgaria, I'm not sure the energy, that's overall energy equivalent. So it's not just electricity that it would show up as a special thing. It's all energies down to the same base energetically. And on that Germany thing, yes, Czech Republic acts as a battery for Germany, but just as much as Germany acts as a battery for the Czech Republic, because the trade is roughly balanced. If you're talking about one-way batteries, then we are a battery for Austria and Slovakia much more, because that's more or less just export.
Okay, but Germany is very dangerous, especially when the wind blows and sun shines. So there are overflows.
Yeah.
And sometimes it looks like blackouts for Czech Republic. You know,
Yeah, they have to.
So anyway.
Indeed. This is the same problem actually with Denmark. Denmark has the most, wind farms, and as an example, but it imports more than 60% of its needs actually. And in the battery function in Sweden, or they need as a compensation when they don't have any wind. So every good example with wind energy needs sort of another country playing the role of battery, sort of. Yeah.
Why not?
Okay, you admit.
Easily dispatch power is needed. There's
Yeah,
no
yeah.
avoiding the technical truth. Nothing wrong with that.
That's the beauty of negative price. When you're generating
Yes.
electricity and can't get rid of it, then you pay people to get rid of it for
Yes.
you. And it happens regularly
Yeah.
in Scandinavia. So
Well, it can happen on Ote too.
Okay.
It's a Czech market.
Further questions? If not, I have one question. You have spoken about price caps, and they don't work, and we are all happy with that. But the European Union is also pursuing a different path, that is introducing the notion of super profits or extra profits or super taxes on super profits, which is, in my view, that's another way of saying we need to nationalize the energy industry. Because if you introduce the principle according to which you're going to tax profits, to begin with, you shouldn't tax profits, period. But if you also decide to increase the tax rate on profits in the energy industry, of course, it happens what you mentioned, that is, companies are not going to invest anymore, because if they can't get the profit, how are they going to match the losses they go through and they suffer during the investment period? So if they do not invest, we're going to face the problems we've been facing in the recent past. And then the European Union or whoever will say, well, you see, the market doesn't work. Well, you see, companies are not investing. They're not able, the market is not able to meet our energy requirements. Therefore, we have to give extra power to the union, and therefore we have to have continental energy policies managed or directed or ruled, governed by some bureaucrats in Brussels. I think that is even more dangerous because if you just introduce price caps, it's easy to see that they don't work. And then you have public opinion against it. But the idea, the ideology of taxing super profits is very catchy. It's sexy. People like it because who is in favor of super profits? Well, shareholders are, of course, but public opinion say they're exploiting our needs. They're taking advantage of our suffering, and they should be taxed, and the tax revenue should be given to those who need energy and can't make ends meet. Of course, the revenues, the problem is that currently the tax revenues from super profits will be negligible. But from ideological viewpoint,
and a precedent.
It makes a lot of sense. Well,
of
course, public opinion take it. And what happens if we're going to have a nationalized or unionized energy industry? That is a recipe for disaster. I mean.
Definitely.
And that's not too far away because you know the story is when something doesn't work, tax it. When taxes don't work, nationalize it. And we've seen it with the energy policy is a mess, basically. And as you said, companies do not invest because they're afraid of price caps, afraid of taxation, but they're afraid of regulation in general. And if I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, don't ask me to invest with a 10-year horizon. And these are huge amounts of money, so they stand still. And the answer will be nationalization. And we've already seen what bureaucrats can do about it. So you struck an optimistic note at times. I'm far more pessimistic than you are, but maybe I'm wrong. So I don't know whether you have some final comments on that, and then maybe we can close the session.
Well, if I can join you, I'm surprised that you've interpreted my words as optimism. I think I'm just as pessimistic as you are, and I will add now some more pessimism into your evaluation, because I think, again, back to the notion of the unhappy medium, I think we're already there. If you look at, you talked rightly about investment. Now, to build a relatively small renewable power plant, you don't need the government. I mean, paradoxically, for relatively less capital-intensive investments like renewables, which compared to the gas power station is relatively small, that's the paradox. You wouldn't need government backing, and yet you have government backing in the smaller projects. Now, if you look at the other side of the spectrum, the most expensive investments, which I also mentioned, which is the nuclear, show me a country in European Union which finances new power stations purely from business loans of the energy company or past profits, etc. I don't think there is one. So we've already nationalized investment into nuclear, either directly by whatever company in that country owns the nuclear power stations, if there is nuclear power stations, is generally owned by the government. And if not, then at least the new construction of nuclear power plants is always underwritten by government and therefore pretty much going out of the exchequer. Now, there used to be one country which managed to, if you squint your eyes enough, you could declare that country as financing nuclear power stations more or less on business terms rather than state involvement. There is through regulations there is state involvement in everything. Part of the cost, the extra cost of building nuclear power stations is through government regulations, but at least on the grand scheme of things, it was more private finance than government finance. There was one country in the European Union. Suffice it to say that country is no longer in the European Union.
Okay, indeed.
Hello, my name is Daria. I'm a student here at Anglo-American University, and I have a question. You mentioned about Russian boycott and its consideration that there'll be an end to it, and you have examples of countries like Lithuania, which historically has deep ties and dependence on Russian resources, but in 2014 they had an LNG terminal be opened as a result of the Crimean annexation, and now they're practically independent of Russian gas. And do you think there is a possibility that EU as a whole will be independent of Russian natural resources, or most importantly, is there such an ambition?
The EU will be independent?
Independent.
We more or less almost are. I.e., there is hardly any imports of gas, at least for the traditional uses of gas. There is some converted gas and specialist things, but that's outside of the boycott. But I mean, it was actually, I think, a marvelous story, because the propositions at the beginning of the war, there were some visionaries who said, well, maybe we'll be able to get rid of half of Russian gas imports into Europe by the end of the year. The reality has far exceeded those expectations, and we've more or less become really independent of Russian gas, which was, by the way, the harder thing to do. It was always said, well, maybe we'll manage to get rid of Russian oil as imports by the end of the year, but certainly not gas. And we managed that. So, in principle, at the cost of the higher price, we've more or less become independent of Russian gas. What I was trying to say with that boycott thing is that higher price is purely suspended in the air by the boycott. If the moment the boycott was lifted, the price would drop quite a lot, probably even in the short run below the pre-COVID levels. They were more or less giving it for free. I posted that as a potential political risk from the investors' point of view, because the investors, they are spurned by governments. Look, get rid of this dependence, build up European capacity through LNG terminals, and they're going to say, okay, we'll do that, but promise us that you won't succumb to the political pressures of the population in the streets, and you will not live that gas, at least for a couple of years. Like I said, we know that in probably 20, 30 years' time it's not going to be there. But you won't remove it earlier than, I don't know, 3-5 years. Give us 5 years window of a guaranteed boycott, and at that point we would have that transition into even more real independence from Russia even much faster. So that's, I was just trying to point out the investor's point of view for whom the potential end of the boycott is a business risk.
May I contradict you?
Okay.
I don't know if you can see that. This is a graph. Can you see the? Or maybe closer. Yeah. You see the brown, the red, dark red point. This is the part of LNG, Russian LNG, being still imported by Europe until now. So part of the natural gas that we didn't get is returning under form mixed with other, but is returning partly back to us for a better price under the form of LNG. So this is okay. This is a part of it, and the point is, of course, the Germans are very eager to look for better conditions, and waiting for better conditions, I think, to get again, I mean, natural gas. If they can do it, they certainly will do it. And I heard also that the Russians consider repairing the gas pipelines, and because it can work again. I mean, I'm not so sure we're going to let it unused and let these beautiful gas pipelines, you know, just going out like that. I wouldn't say that in 10 years ahead, if we're not dead, if we're not dead, some strategy, some tactic, nuclear bombs, but we might get again some gas from Russia. It could be, and because we still get it anyway, under form from GNL. It didn't completely stop. So
just very quick metaphysical joiner. It's true that some LNG gas is coming maybe by third countries. So part of the Asian gas which has been liberated for Europe is only liberated because Russian gas gets to Asia instead, right? So of course there is more gas available for Europe through LNG because Russia continues to export either directly through LNG or to others. But the key difference is getting the dependence on Russia is really done by the pipelines, because they have a starting point and a set ending point. Start in Russia, they end in Europe. Now, because we no longer need them, that was the key, whether we would be able to supply enough gas to Europe without those pipelines. And that has been true. We're now no longer needing those pipelines, therefore they're rusting either because they're full of seawater or because they're not needed, and that was the key. So now, that's the different question. If you are getting gas through pipeline, you have only one seller, whoever happens to be on the other side of the pipeline. If you're buying it through LNG, which we have now built up the thing, now we can look at any supplier around the world, and you're not dependent on Russia in any way. If it happens to be in some sort of business sense and not intervening and contravening the boycott, okay, part of that gas might be Russia. But the point is, Russia is replaceable as part of the LNG thing. Russia is not replaceable on the pipeline thing. So getting rid of the pipeline dependence was key. And the LNG is just footnotes. Whoever is doing the LNG supplying, because anybody in the world can do it.
I want to ask a question. I essentially am not representing AAU in that question. But I wanted to ask, because this is the title of the conference, is there anything to kind of fix? And it has been a very economical and commerce-driven discussion. But the reason why there is a lot of political tension is climate change, and this has not been touched here, because we're recording the session also for our students and for other young people who seem to hold that topic very dear. I wanted to briefly just ask of your opinion on the fact if the current setup or the current market that led to the problem in the first place, in one way or another, is able to fix it without some strong intervention. So first of all, is the market able to fix the problem of...
Which problem?
Well,
change.
the problem of ultimately climate change through energy management. So through, for example, there was a topic on sustainables, and we're not doing enough, we're not doing it fast enough. I come from Poland, which has quite poor policies with that regard in the last years, and has been a purely political decision not to pursue that angle. It has nothing to do with economy as such. And the question is there something to fix? And my question is, do you think if there is something to fix in regard to the topic of climate change and pollution from the non-renewables or other energy sources in the context of...
I can tell you short and brief. By the way, you are, just to let you know, your government, do you know the 10H rule for wind turbines?
Yes.
Okay, just to let you know, so Poland was a really good wind market for renewables. It was taking off quite fast. Then they changed the government, the coal government, elections, coal people, we want to protect the jobs. And they introduced a legislation that the turbine, it's called 10H rule, that the closest turbine to the house or dwelling needs to be some 1,000 kilometers, something far away, whatever. And they effectively choked the industry. So all that was built during the past couple of years, just the old projects with the old permits. So the government changed and they blocked the development of renewables for political reasons. Because they blocked it, what was installed was the old technology, not as efficient. These are 2-3 megawatt turbines. Now we have 6 megawatt turbines. Which one takes more space and more land or more steel? So they effectively, by changing for political reasons, they choked their own wind or renewable energy policy, costing the country a couple of years of investment. So every country is individual. Every area has their own problem. Every kingdom has their own king. Do I think that many countries need to do much more to work on this and even come close to the targets? Yes. We're not going to reach the targets EU set for ourselves. What is it, 35% of renewables by 35 of install base or whatever their goal is. On the European level, many countries will not make that. So you're right, it's not working. I don't know how to fix it. What I do know is that I understand the political reason to do something, but I think the reasons should be not just political. We need this, we don't need that. We need less of this, more of that. If we think more in those philosophical directions, but otherwise you're correct. The system is so fragmented. America is kicking ass now because of the tax credits. We are struggling here with capex, with auctions, with prices, whatever, and it's not working. I'm sorry, I don't know how to fix it. I can tell you each country what problem they have and how to fix it, but to do it on a global level. So, just one thing is positive, and energy trading is growing. That's more important, and that can allow, once Ukraine goes back to online, for example, or some other place, we can make the wind farms there, sell electricity here. There's so much more room to maneuver. So.
I would say you have to trust more the biggest companies, because if you have a look, for example, I mean, GE is the same situation, but you have Total Energy or in France or the E.ON in Germany. They are on both sides. They are on fossil energy, but then they have enough investments, then enough money, enough revenues to invest in renewables. And these renewables need so much capital that we need not less capitalism, but more capitalism. Because we need a huge capital, a huge amount of capital. So this is a time where we need huge companies who could fix the problem. The problem are the states. And the fear of losing sovereignty is on one side, this war, Russian war in Ukraine was, had positive consequences we thought we're going to get out of fossil energy and we're going faster to renewables, but it revived as well the fears of losing sovereignty. You see, Poland doesn't want to be invaded, and just everybody is afraid of losing their sovereignty. Of course, energy is a big part of that. So the problem is a political one. It's not the companies. If you would have, I mean, you see, if you have huge capital, you need a lot of money to build it, infrastructures. Only big companies, a lot of capital can do it. The states are bankrupt anyway in Europe. You know, the financial crisis is coming, and the debt crisis, and they're not a safe solution. Everybody thinks state is safe. Not at all. I mean, it's just starting again, and we should trust more international companies, worldwide companies which have solutions. And this is something which have nothing anymore to do with ordoliberalism. You know, the small little world and small companies, and we need the huge international companies to come forward. Yeah.
Okay. I think we can.
One sentence, just very quickly.
No.
Okay.
We call it a day. I thank you very much, Jiří and the Anglo-American University, for having made this event possible. And I thank you all for your patient attention. And I think there are refreshments in the next room, so you're welcome to help yourself.
To end on a positive note, after our speakers have presented us with so many different outlooks, I would like to thank you all for your time and energy, and different types of energy. This was a very insightful discussion. So thank you very much for coming, and I'd like to invite everyone to go over to the next room for refreshments and drinks. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.